for a long time. So 24/7 industry, you have to stay up, you have to remain functional. So it spent a lot of time digging into BCDR and how DR planning works, and not just on the technical side, but also on the policy and procedure side. And if you have different compliance frameworks that you need to honor and those kinds of things, happy to answer any questions around that. So, pretty deep background when it comes to the actual paperwork involved as well. So happy to be here.
Always glad to have you jump on here with me, Trace. Jeremy, why don't you give us a little background on you?
Sure. My name is Jeremy Cumby. I'm the director of reactive operations. In counterpoint to Mr. Trace, I do all the non-boring, super fun stuff. A lot of running out and making sure that if you do have a failure, we correct that immediately. My team is generally who you're going to be seeing and talking to if you're interacting with In-Telecom on a I need this done or I have this problem type of basis. We have a lot of interaction between the two of us on what we're seeing in the field, what's happening with the clients, what we can add to our schedule to make sure that this is, if it is something that can be prevented in the future, that we prevent it. But mostly my team is dedicated to getting in the middle of a problem, finding out very quickly how to resolve it and bring you back up to where you can function normally again.
Yeah, definitely good to have you on here. And while we're waiting on Ben to resolve his technical issues, just give a brief introduction to him. Ben is our newly appointed director of client services. He has come in, developed our client success team, and really, created a strong department behind him to make sure that our clients are succeeding. So when he gets in here, he'll be able to answer some of your questions on, more of the how In-Telecom handles things from a client-facing perspective. But when he gets in here, we'll move to that. So Trace, Jeremy, kind of move things on over to you here. We're coming into storm season, right? And it's interesting timing given what some of y'all are in the North Shore area. Not too terribly long ago, we had some massive storms roll through the North Shore area and cause a lot of havoc. And we actually ended up having to enact our own disaster recovery plan. So it's pertinent in that you never really know when things are going to happen, even outside of storm season. But now that we're moving into it, kind of talk. What can we expect? What does storm season bring besides uncertainty?
Yeah, look, I know Jeremy's going to have a lot to speak on this, being directly in the New Orleans area. I'm up north, and I can tell you, a hurricane specifically right now. Granted, a lot of what we're going to talk about today applies to any number of DR scenarios, whether it's fire or even things like cyber attacks, right? Which I think it needs to be added to the list of business continuity and disaster recovery. But I think it's not always such a massive undertaking when a storm like this is coming and you have time to prepare. I think a lot of the planning that goes up front is important, because with hurricane season, I think we see a lot of small emergencies. You're going to have some flooding or maybe some people that can't get into the office. And then you also have some large disasters, right? A tornado actually hit the office. And so I think accounting for the day-to-day within all of those scenarios is very important, right? And hurricane season, specifically as we focus in on that, I'm curious what Jeremy's seen in the past, being from where he's at, because I haven't got to talk to him too much on this. So I'm curious if some horror stories, man, or some examples that you got.
Well, I mean, everybody knows the classic worst case scenario, which was the Katrina situation. But beyond that, there's all sorts of things, like things you don't even expect. Like Plaquemines recently saw during a storm surge that where they'd never flooded before, they were completely underwater. Some of the things we don't think about is that certain infrastructure pieces in whatever city you're in could go down. In one of the most recent hurricanes we had in New Orleans, the main, I don't know exactly what you call it. It's basically a power tower that transmits the primary input for power into the city. It's across the river. It got torn down. No one expected that at all. So we were looking at from energy, I want to say 2 months of estimated downtime. Everyone in the city in the area was pretty much out for the count when it came to that. We're all running off generators at this point. But heavy winds by itself can be just as damaging. Like Trace mentioned recently here, just in the Slidell area, we had multiple tornadoes that tore roofs off buildings or destroyed them outright. We had a few clients we had to move into new buildings and get them set up with completely new infrastructure because of that. But anything from you're not fully aware of how your building reacts to water until it has it. You're not fully aware of exactly what your cooling situation is for even things you're running off of power backups. Like you may have enough, you may maybe planned enough to where you do have power backups for like, I don't know, maybe correctly running your internal services. But do you have enough power or do you have it in your plan to run the cooling systems for those areas? Should you leave those doors open so that while we're already dealing with one mess, we're not dealing with two with your core starting to overheat? Tons of things. And it goes all the way down to like, can you function outside of your brick and mortar establishment? Do you have a plan for how you can function if you're not physically in the building you're currently in? Tons of things when it comes to that, though.
Yeah, no, perfect. You said it just right, man. You said plan. And I think that's where it comes down to doing the paperwork and making sure that you've kind of checked the boxes before the outage, right? And we'll use a real world example, similar to what Jeremy was talking about. We dealt with a situation where North Louisiana, we don't ever get the hard storms. You know, we're pretty isolated, but Hurricane Laura blasted through North Louisiana, took out some buildings and things like that. But because we had a good plan, we opened up our business continuity plan, which I think everybody should have. I'm going to kind of talk about that real quick. It's really just an internal published document. So anyone can pull that up and go, okay, I know who to call if I have a power outage, or here's my chain of command. Here's everybody that needs to be notified. And here are the things that are specific to our business that we don't need to focus on. I think it's important to realize when you're creating a business continuity plan, that you focus on what you can do without and what you have to have, right? You're never going to operate at 100% during that type of an outage, right? You're going to operate at 80%, and that's a good number to shoot for. What can you know, maybe you run a call center, and in this example, we had to mobilize a call center of 20 people. We sent 10. That's what we could do. We sent 10 to an offsite location. We sent another 5 that we knew in our business continuity plan had the ability to work remote, and they were out of the hurricane path. So that gave us 15 of our normal staff of 20 that we were able to mobilize. And we knew that, right? We were 3 days ahead of it. We went ahead and rolled a team. We knew that our building infrastructure was going to suffer, that we weren't going to be able to get to the building probably. So I think those are the kinds of things that outside of the technical preparation that I'm really going to lean on Jeremy for during this call. I mean, a lot of my background is the non-technical side, the business operational side, the planning side. I think it's really, really important to have a planning committee, a DR committee in your organization and at In-Telecom. And I'm sure Ben would be happy on the customer success side to have somebody sit with you maybe once a year on those committee meetings and make sure that In-Telecom's role, if you're one of our clients, or that we know what the plan is, right? We're happy to take your business continuity plan and put that into action, right? When it's our role. But I think every business continuity plan is going to be a little different. And sitting down and talking through that about once a quarter, even once a month, if you can spare it, is not a bad idea. And then when something happens, or maybe you do a fire drill, I think those are very, very important things for a business continuity plan, right? And I know Ben hasn't been here very long, and I'm going to speak for him. I can promise you the better plan you have, the less chaotic the reaction is going to be, right? When you're calling Ben's team or you're calling Jeremy's team, you have a better sense of what's going to happen, and the unknown can be scary, right? And if you're already dealing with a disaster of some kind and you know the storm's coming, that's chaotic enough. So I think having a good plan in place before then and knowing who your points of contact are, your various vendors, right? Your power company, your IT provider, your cyber provider, just really helps give you a peace of mind during these types of situations. So
Absolutely.
I feel the planning is a very important part.
Yeah, for sure. And while we have a quick second here, we do have Ben free of Zoom related technical issues.
Yeah.
Ben, you mind giving us just a quick introduction to who you are and kind of what your role is?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Ben, obviously, right? I'm our director of client success here at In-Telecom, right? I oversee our client success managers, and we work with our existing clients, right? Ensuring that they're set up for success and all of their operations, right? Understanding their business objectives, understanding, right, their risks, and helping them navigate those risks, right? And I think as it correlates to some of the things that we've talked about, right? I think the place you have to start is just to have something, right? Have a plan in place. They can be as complex as you want them to be, but they can also be simple to begin with, right? And I think that's where my team steps in whatever shape or form that looks like initially, right? To start somewhere, right? We help you navigate that and start somewhere.
For sure. And the starting part is what we're hoping to get covered today. Is
Yeah.
just thinking about it from a outside looking in. And that kind of leads me to, I think, the most pertinent topic about this, getting a written game plan in place is, from your perspective, we've got hundreds of clients, right? Jeremy, Trace, you guys are responsible for helping those clients when things go down. So, based on what we do, what we'd recommend, what should that plan include? What things need to be taken into account that, you just don't think about until something's already gone wrong, and now you got to kind of reel back.
I think from a tech perspective, specifically hardware, the thing that even when I was doing non-MSP tech work, that you just see that companies don't think about. There's going to be battery backups, specifically UPSs that can hold the entire power load of your main switches and servers. Not to run them, because these are not generators. What you're looking for here is like hardware that's going to allow those pieces of equipment to not just hard power down because you lost connectivity. Pardon me, you lost electricity. That'll give your systems enough time to be able to be properly shut down, so you don't run any risk of data loss, corruption, things of that nature. The bigger thing, pardon me, not the bigger thing. That's pretty much the big thing. But the other thing most people don't think about when it comes to disaster recovery is, does everyone know what to do? One of the biggest things we saw was that companies in themselves don't think the same way you would if you were dealing with like your children, for instance. In most of our upbringings, whenever you're little, you get taught you need to have a phone tree. You need to know exactly who you talk to for X, Y, or Z. If so-and-so is not available, this is your fallback. That's one of the biggest pieces that I could say, like, that anyone non-technically related could focus on as far as your disaster recovery plan in-house, no matter what type of business you have. Well, let's say we're in danger right now. Who needs to know? Who's driving right now? Do they know not to? Things of that nature. Do you know that if there is like a big storm that may be coming, that you should reach out to some of your service providers beforehand? Let them know that you're expecting some bad weather in your area. If you're working with companies like us, of course, we reach out to you whenever we see something like that going on. But it's just something to think about. Other hardware related stuff is, if you do work in a classical like brick and mortar style situation, do people have laptops? Do you have mobile hotspots? Can you pick up right now, no matter what level of importance your job is to the overall function of your company? If I grabbed you out of that room and said, now you have to work at a Holiday Inn in Mississippi for a week, can you do it? That's the things in the background that like need to be taken into account when it comes to like budgeting. One of the biggest things that's been wonderful over the last like decade is watching how many options you have for software-based telecommunications. Like, we don't need a handset. We don't need the desk phone to make this work. Like with our ITC Cloud app that we have right now, I only need something that I can load it on. Laptop, phone, cell phone, whatever have you. And it's exactly like I'm sitting in my office right now. So I'd say the three bigs that I think people don't think about is communication with inside and outside with your own people and the people who are supposed to support you. Power backups, definitely need some opportunity there to be able to shut your systems down correctly. And lost myself, finding myself. I just blanked the thing I just said.
Absolutely. completely understand. Yet the one thing I think that makes the most sense there is responsibilities, right? We've got our processes, but you mentioned, does everybody know what to do? Is it who's making the phone call? Who's calling the insurance company? Who's got the tree of
Yeah,
contact?
Taylor, you beat me to it, man, because that's exactly I was going to say. Jeremy said two of my favorite words on the proactive side, and that's the people in the cloud. What you can do in the cloud versus what your people can do and where they can do it. And to Jeremy's point, right? You can't remember it all at the same time, so you got to write it in. And that's why I think it's very, very important to look at what's cloud, what's not. Can we move some stuff into the cloud? Can we have X, Y, Z operate? And I think that people aspect comes back around to really facilitate what Jeremy and his team do on the technical aspect, right? Where they can focus on the technical stuff. So if you know who of your employees can work remote, do they have sufficient internet where they are? They don't live in the woods where there's no, service, right? That just knowing who can be remote, just knowing who has the ability to pack up and travel if needed, because not everybody can do that as well, right? Maybe they're caretakers or something like that. A list of who your employees are and what their abilities are during a disaster, I think is very, very valuable. And then something
Saw that just recently with the tornadoes that came through Slidell, right? You and I don't happen to work in Slidell, so we were able to continue operating. But from a recovery standpoint, we had to spend quite a bit of time figuring out where can we send people? Can they go to Gonzales? Can they go to our other office? What does that look like? It
right.
gotta
Know
take
your
the
fallback
responsibility
plan
on
for
it.
your people. We've done things in the past where I think it makes a lot of sense. Maybe you're not a hybrid or remote workforce type of organization. Keep some go bags packed. Doesn't take much to have a couple of bags packed that have a laptop, that have a hotspot. It's a little bit of an overhead cost because you're paying to keep something active. But at the end of the day, if you have critical personnel, like maybe you're a finance driven company. Finance is a very deadline driven type of industry where you've got to get payroll out and you've got to do that. Giving people the ability to just grab a bag and go can really help you continue to operate. And when you start to pick up the pieces, it makes it easier, right? Because I think another thing I've seen organizations forget about, I don't want to say fail at, because this is more of an ongoing learning sort of thing, is now that we did all this, how do we get people back? Right? We can't just have the entire call center pack up and come back because then they're off the phones, right? You have to have a retreat portion of your business continuity plan, right? We've done this, we've deployed, we stayed active, right? The hurricane's gone, power's back on at the location. How do we slowly trickle those people back into the office? So when you're considering your DR plan, all of that is important, but don't forget to close the circle. Don't forget to figure out how you're going to get your people back and how you're going to get your operations back to 100% at your primary organization.
Yeah,
That's
I think that kind of brings us into the next part, which is really the one thing you can't plan for, right, is the unknown, right? We know what storms are going to bring. We never know which storm's going to bring what. But knowing exactly what could happen and having plans in place for that, right? So Jeremy, you talked about, backup. We know there's probably going to be power outages, right? Power surges might damage equipment. The wind might take the roof off the top of your building and your call center might get wet, so you kind of have to plan for that. Is anything that you guys do on your side to, obviously you can't know what's going to happen and when you're putting these kind of plans together to kind of look at all the possible outcomes, or, how do you accommodate for that?
Well, the big thing is like you're not going to have a plan that covers every single aspect of everything that happens. Like even with us, like we teach people how to make disaster recovery plans, but were we 100% prepared for the roof to be ripped off of the building while we're actively taking calls from clients that were having similar issues? No. So I would say one of the big things is like you have to be as flexible as humanly possible. Like for us, we shifted to a safe area. We kept things back up and running pretty quickly. But like some of the core things you can physically do, like what Trace was saying about the idea of the go bag, I would highly recommend that any company that has more than like 5 key people have at least 5 mobile hotspots that you can just power on at any given point. Keep those batteries charged. Same thing we warn everybody about for your home when it comes to a disaster, especially weather related. It's super great that you have all these wonderful things. When's the last time we checked it? It's like fire extinguisher. When's the last time it's been tested? We know it works. With the mobile hotspot thing, a lot of the things that intimidate people about keeping those on hand is they're like 40 to 60 bucks a month for something you may not use. But most people don't realize you can actually set those all to, I think it's called seasonal hold. And it'll go to minimal cost because the unit itself is not physically active. To turn those from seasonal offline mode to active is literally either just making a quick phone call or clicking a button from their website, depending on if you can get to a website at that point. But the whole process is super easy when it comes to that. Whenever we were doing this for the school system that I used to work with, we had 22 locations in 6 different states. And so you've got flooding to hurricanes to high pressure to high winds to things like that. A lot of the things that we enacted on a physical level were just those little small things. Like there's no roof. Where do we go? Do we have an exit plan? What equipment do we have that we can deploy immediately? And to Trace's point earlier, one of the big things I see a lot of people trip over is not even necessarily the preparation beforehand. It's what you do when you think it's now over. There's such a big rush to get back into business as usual that you get the thumbs up, all clear signal, run back into the building, and then the power company tells you have to shut down your grid for another like 6 hours while they work on something else they just found. Now you're right back down. Do you run right back out the door, or do you give it some time, plan it out, and see like maybe I'll send a couple of my people back in. We'll test drive it for a little bit. We'll see about the major return in a week, things like that. But I would say like for me, especially since before I joined with In-Telecom, I was the equivalent of all you guys. I was a client who had an MSP that was my vendor. The thing I absolutely relied on was checking in with experts that knew better than me what to do in the situation I was in, that had helped other clients with it before. But mostly doing the regular checks, doing the equivalent of do the batteries still work? We would have meetings at least yearly with our suppliers and say, if the worst happens, if the building literally ceases to exist, how am I covered for data backups? Can I recover my data? If my entire infrastructure gets hit literally by lightning and now it's completely destroyed, what is a way in which I could get back up and running to begin with? Like, how does this function? So you don't need to be like an engineer to plan this stuff out. All you really need to do is know that there needs to be a plan, talk to the right people. Like in this case, I would recommend us, of course. And we can work it through with you. The easiest way I found as a client who was trying to ask the right questions was we actually were investing in cybersecurity insurance. It was a thing that came up as being like a requirement for a lot of the school systems. Those questions that they have literally in that list of things you need to account for has a full disaster recovery plan as far as your insurance company is concerned. If you don't have a plan like that, if you don't have an insurance company that requires it at the moment, that's something you can easily look up online as well. Disaster recovery plan required by insurance. Enter a little state name beside it, and that'll give you what your question should be. And if you're talking to people like us, we can take those questions and go, here are your answers specifically for those. And this is what this means. This is why this is important. And here's the little bits that they're not actually asking that would also be super useful.
No, look, I think that's a really good point in protecting your business, right? And protecting what you have is more than just your business. And your vendors are a part of your business. And so you can have this really great plan. And let's say you're one of our clients, and a lot of what I do is help you prepare on the proactive side. Are your backups working? Can they be restored? Where do they live? You know, a lot on the cyber side. Are we monitoring the machines? Do we know where people are? All of those things are very, very important, right? But also the vendors that support your organization, do they have a plan, right? What if you're, I came from healthcare, so a specialty pharmacy, for instance. One thing a specialty pharmacy does is they're responsible for very high dollar, very important medication. So if they are unable to ship medication, it's a problem for the people that need that life-saving medication. So their point of sale provider that lets them process those medications, what's their plan for a disaster? Maybe everything's great at the pharmacy, but all of a sudden the company that manages the point of sale didn't have a plan and they cease to exist. Well, now that has affected your business. So I think reaching out to your vendors saying, hey, what's your DR plan and how do we fit in it? How can you maintain operations so that we can maintain operations? Because us as a vendor in telecom, our internal IT processes to keep us alive and well during a disaster directly affect our clients. We are their vendor. If we go down, then there's nothing that they can do for all of those IT services that we provide. So to Jeremy's point, I would challenge everyone during your meetings about your business continuity is, okay, how are we protecting the business and our assets, whether our assets are maybe we have a company that for compliance reasons, they house all of our documentation. Okay, how are they protecting your documentation? Making sure they can provide you with a DR plan. How are you notified if those businesses go down? So as you expand your sort of DR scenarios and your table talks and your walkthroughs, I would reach out to my vendors in my organization and I would say what's their plan, and I would have that filed away. That way you have it to lean on, because again, if you have cyber insurance or you have legal issues surrounding this, which is that's probably a whole other session, right? Talking about all of the documentation and the legal issues and all of this stuff. But I think having your vendors accountable to you as part of your business is an essential way you can protect your assets as a business. Because if we're maintaining your backups, we need to be able to provide those backups to you. And if we don't have a good DR plan in place and we don't have good replication in place and all of those things that we should have as your vendor, well, you can do everything right and during a disaster still lose because we lost, right? And that's how I would challenge every vendor that way as I develop my DR plan. So I think that's a very good point. And part of your preparation, right? That you can do everything right. Make sure you're holding your key vendors accountable and identifying who they are and what they can do for you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so in kind of getting to some meat and potatoes of this here, Jeremy, you kind of mentioned a few things that you ought to do, checking batteries, making sure things still work. When as a part of our disaster recovery plan, right, we have steps that we take a week in advance when we know a storm's coming, right? We've planned out well ahead of what's going to happen, that we need to start communicating now. We need to start building a list of people for X, Y, and Z scenarios. When the storms are coming, you've got a little bit of advance notice. It's out in the Gulf, it's a week away. What sort of steps should you start taking right off the bat?
I would say immediately my big focus would be the plan check. Let's assume we've already gotten to the stage where we've talked about this like mid-year, maybe we're doing it annually at this point, and we know what our plan should be. We know what our guarantees from our vendors should be because we listened to this wonderful webinar where these guys told us we should check on it, and we did. Now let's say that we got the disaster that's foreseeable, like it's on its way. This could be bad. We got people who are evacuating, or there's a possibility of a flood scenario, whatever. The first thing I would do right out the gate is I would have a conversation with my people internally, make sure that they understood what our standing plan was and what their individual pieces was. This is where we're talking about like the concept of like the phone tree. Does everyone know what their role is if tomorrow I say this is a go? Immediately behind that, I'm having conversations with my key vendors. I'm talking to them about like, this is what we discussed. Can we do a trial run of this beforehand? Do we have enough time? Hopefully you don't put yourself in a position where the last time you've gotten a live run of what would happen during your disaster recovery plan is just before the disaster. But if you have any time at all to see this coming, that would be my very next step. We'd go into talking about the concept of the go bags. Did we actually get those that ability to do work remote? Is it in-house? Do we have it right now? Is everything charged up? Have we tested it? Do we need to test it together with one of our service providers? Things of that nature. Things that were on vacation hold, do they need to go live just in case? Is everything working as best we think it can? And a lot of pay very close attention to what you're hearing from the outside world. If public schools are shutting down, it's unsafe for children. Should you be at work? Should your people be driving through that area? Are you accounting for the fact that there's not going to be daycare for those people now? Those are all the things you can start doing immediately as you start seeing this stuff coming down the line. Is there anything that you put off or we didn't necessarily have the budget for, or we'll get to it later, and now we see something that's looming? Well, you may not necessarily be in the best position. You may be in a position where several different people had the same thought, and now the door's kind of crowded. But doing something is extremely better than doing nothing. And if you're working with some of the groups that I've worked with over the years, we all kind of expect a little bit of it wasn't top of mind, so it was forgotten. And a lot of us are really good at figuring this out on the fly for you if there's little pieces that we didn't pre-plan. But for you personally, as you're doing this, biggest things is like, have you double checked your plan? Have you double checked your emergency equipment? Do you know who of your people are in the most danger if they have to travel to or from work? Who's most likely to go completely no contact if they lose power? Is there a backup for that person? Those are really the first bigs that I would be looking at as I'm looking literally at the storm cloud coming across the way here. Would be, am I as confident as I can be with this? And then, of course, the biggest, most important thing overall is keep your ears open. If you think you have a wonderful idea for like, it doesn't look that bad here, it may not be that bad, we're probably not going to have to enact our disaster recovery plan, but you see that your neighbors are, or you see that the public systems are, or the classic joke, if Waffle House shut down, run. What's going on around you? And then I would trust the group more than I would trust myself if I was trying to be confident and safe at the same time.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I think when you're in a chaotic industry, and a lot of times maybe you have a board that you report to, or you have different insurance boxes you have to check. I think obviously calling all of those people and letting them know what to expect, or if you're a client-driven business, calling your client, say, hey, we're enacting our plan. We're going to do our best. You know, we have a plan, and hopefully you've reviewed that with your clients, and we're going to stay up. And I think Jeremy touched on the very important things that not a lot of people take care of during that sort of final prep during a disaster is your people. And if maybe nothing happens, but the school shut down anyway, that's still going to affect you. Maybe there was a last minute turn. And so I take those as an opportunity to have a fire drill. And so to build off of what Jeremy was talking about, maybe the storm's coming, you're a week out, and maybe there's a 50-50 shot you're gonna get hit, right? And as it gets closer, still maybe 50-50. We've been in that situation before, especially up in North Louisiana, because we're never really sure how bad it's gonna be up there. But one of the things we did is we said, okay, if this doesn't happen, this is gonna be our annual test. So we went ahead and we rolled the people over to our fail back location over in Texas. We went ahead and cycled our generators, called our providers, called our vendors, ran through our phone trees, put our forwarding in place for our call center. You know, sort of, we ran through our entire plan as if we were going to get hit anyway. And then as we got 24 hours closer, right? Okay, we are going to get hit. So great, we're ready. Or we didn't get hit and everything's cool and we can start enacting our return to work plan. But either way, I think depending on what, and that's where going all the way back to the beginning, your plan is very important as your playbook. I think those initial things that Jeremy's talking about, you should do anyway. Even if you don't know that you're 100%, right? We're not going to get much of that. Okay, go ahead and do it though. Go ahead and run through those plans. Better to talk that out and see if there's a gap in the plan. Because anytime you do it for real, it's very different than when you're doing a tabletop or a dry run. So I think if you prep, that's one of the initial things I would do is I would run my plan as far as you really wanted to, even if it turns out to be nothing, because I think those fire drills are important. And you're going to find things that didn't work like you thought they would, right? And then that brings us to the after action report. It's a constant sort of thing. We did all of our planning, everything hit, we rolled our trucks, we did what we needed to do. Then you come back after your return to work getting back to work safely, getting back to work smoothly. What does that look like for our people? And you sort of sit your subject matter experts down and you look at, okay, next time, what are those initial things that we should have done? You know, I was
The
like
good
Jeremy
news
said,
is, at least for the people in Louisiana, we're gonna get, and every year we do get a lot of opportunities to test these plans. You know, we get to those, we don't need to cancel school scenarios. It's not gonna be that bad. We see that every single year, especially as, you know, June, July, even sometimes August. The first 2 months of season are usually pretty slow, or at least the last few years have been. And we don't start seeing anything until August, September. Sometimes is, you know, the hurricane season lasts through the end of October, right? We might not see it, but we're getting a lot of opportunities to refine those plans over time. And, you know, even if you're not taking an active approach to, you know, testing these plans, one way or another, you're going to kind of have to go through it anyway, right? Just as these scenarios continue to present themselves. All right, so moving on just a little bit, this topic in particular, Ben, I don't know if you want to chime in here, but we talked a little bit about, you know, what happened in Slidell. Trace, you weren't there, I wasn't there. One of the big things that we have to take into account when these kind of things come up and we need to enact our plan is the employee situation, right? Not everybody is going to be in the same place. Not everybody is going to be able to make it to work or even be reachable, right? So when we're talking about, you know, recovery plan from an employee perspective, whether that's families, children, what have you, you know, what kind of things do you need to take into account there to make sure that those plans can run smoothly?
Yeah, I think from a team perspective, you know, is it kind of goes into your own planning for disaster recovery, right? When you're doing your initial analysis and what the business impact is and what's your recovery strategy going to be, and then maybe you start to segment roles and responsibilities into different teams, right? You have team A, team B, team C, and they all have their own different responsibilities. But within your own recovery plan, I think it's really important that you have ownership. And one of the pieces of ownership is always going to be the team, right? How do we check in on the team? How do we make sure that they're safe? How do we make sure that they're equipped to handle the responsibilities that maybe they were given within that recovery plan? So I think those are some of the things you don't necessarily initially think about because we're so focused on just the business continuity or being there to serve our clients. But from a leadership perspective, you're also there to serve your own employees, right? And making sure that they're in a good place. So I think sometimes that goes without saying, but it's also really hard when you're in these situations. That's not always the first thing or top of mind. So I think you just have to incorporate those things into your plan and then make sure there's true ownership within your own organization for that piece of the puzzle.
Fantastic. All right, so this is the challenging part that I think both Trace and Jeremy ought to be able to touch on here is, you know, we've weathered the storm, right? We're now facing unknown scenario A. What can we do to start getting back to work smoothly? What's our goal here? How do we make that happen in the easiest way possible?
I would say first, number one, is slow way down. Don't try to rush this because it would be an awful shame for you to put all this work in, have tested your plan, make sure your people are safe, and then at the trip at the last hurdle, basically. Trying to get back into business as usual as quickly as possible has led to as many outages and problems for businesses as not having a disaster recovery plan. So number one, slow way down. Let's actually talk it out. That same committee that you had that's building your disaster recovery plan should be the same one that's talking about our return to work plan. A lot of us, I think almost universally, had to go through some version of this whenever we were coming out of the COVID quarantines. How do we safely get back? How do we get back to functionary? So number one, take as much time with coming back as you would with your plan for safely getting out or safely continuing your business remotely. I would say, yeah, 100%. That's the first thing that I've seen that most people have a real issue with. Second thing is making sure that you've been in contact with your vendors, that your data and systems are up and functioning. You've had people in your building, in the case of having to leave your building, to make sure everything is as it should be. That your building's safe, for one, definitely a big part. And more, who it now has challenges after the disaster that didn't have those same challenges before the disaster. Maybe it wasn't your business or even your employee's business that had a major issue after disaster, but maybe the daycare center doesn't exist anymore. How many people can't find childcare at the moment? Maybe power went out into their local grocery stores and they're having a tough time with food. Like the human element's a lot of the recovery and getting back in smoothly, like thinking about it, planning it out. Because the worst that can happen is try to drag a bunch of people back in, get your business up and running, and top of mind for them is all the worries they have outside of that room.
Yeah, I think so, right? I think getting your people back in, like Jeremy said, is one of the harder parts. I think if you have a good plan, again, that playbook, right, you should be operating fairly smoothly anyway during the outage. So it shouldn't be that big of an emergency to get back. So even if you're like a materials sort of industry where you're shipping, and I go back to the pharmacy days where we're shipping stuff, we had an offsite warehouse, right, where we could ship from directly when needed to. So we prepped for the hurricane, we boxed up some things we needed, we shipped it to the offsite warehouse. So those people that were working remotely, they could stay working remotely almost indefinitely until we ran out of stuff we sent to the warehouse. So I think that is a very important part. And I see a lot of people so determined to get back so quickly that they forget to check those boxes on the way back in. Maybe they're still over on failover equipment, and then they shove a whole bunch of people into an office, and all of a sudden the network crashes because the throughput on that small firewall that was keeping you going, that was a failover, isn't good, right? So it can support 10 people, but it can't support 50. I think all of those things, Jeremy was spot on that. Go slow. I couldn't have said that any better. Go slow when you're getting back into the office. Make sure you have coverage on both sides. Don't rush to do it. Make sure the vendors in your town are still up. Make sure the infrastructure around your business is back to full capacity before you start thinking about trying to get yourself back to full capacity.
So, all right, so we have a few minutes here, come close to the end. I did want to open up, send a message in the chat just a second ago. Open up the floor here. If anybody's got any questions, by all means, we are here and happy to help answer them. But in the meantime, as we're kind of waiting for those to come through, we do have a hurricane prep checklist to kind of get you jump started on creating your own disaster recovery plan. Obviously, just scan the QR code there on your screen. You'll be able to download that from the website. It's kind of the starting framework, so to speak, to get you up and running, right? Just the basics of what that ought to look like, and get you up to speed a little bit. Alternatively, we're also happy to help you if you've got a plan in place and you want to find out what are we missing. Is there a tech aspect here that we haven't covered that we need to? We have the resources internally to be able to address that, to give you a full assessment of what your situation looks like, and give you some recommendations on what you need to change, what you need to add, where you might have missed planning wise. So by all means, if you're a client, reach out to your reps. Ben's team is here to help you out, and we can get your review in place and help you finalize those plans. Doesn't look like we've got any questions coming in just yet. I'll give it a few minutes just to make sure. Trace, Jeremy, Ben, kind of while we're waiting, any final comments, anything you think we ought to reiterate here just in making these plans come to fruition?
I would say the only thing I could think of off the top of my head right away would be like if you find yourself in a situation where you've heard all this and you're still lost, or you still don't know exactly what to do, or don't feel confident in making these plans on your own, reach out to us. Like we have people here that'd be more than happy to help you. We can go all the way to the level of what we call a virtual CIO. We can plan out your entire IT department. We can definitely help you with your disaster plan.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think final thoughts and, take it as a good sign, right? No questions means we were thorough. And it was that good of a conversation. That's the hat I'm going to wear. And no, I think talking about it internally is very, very important. And even if it's informal, right? You get your committee together, maybe it's you and a couple of key players in your organization. You go to lunch and you just start talking about it, right? And then maybe formalize it after that. What does it look like? Okay, we're going to do just a quarterly hour where we're going to talk about what this looks like and draw it up. But I think that the key thing is to talk about it regularly, have a cadence of keeping it top of mind, and eat that elephant one bite at a time. You can't just tackle the whole thing all at once. So you have to start somewhere. And I think that starts with just a conversation. Who are your subject matter experts? Sit down, have a conversation with what it looks like for your business.
Yeah. I think the other thing there too is treat it like a living document, right? We were talking about this internally. We don't just make this plan once and then run with it forever. Situations change. Our ability to respond to things is going to change. So if you're keeping it constantly looked at and touched and updated, makes it a lot easier as time goes on to, we're not starting from scratch, right? We've experienced this before. We know what to do. We need to move some pieces around here and there.
Yeah, the other thing I would add is it's also really important to test it, right? I think that you're in the midst of your day-to-day. You always have your competing priorities. You're trying to service your clients, trying to service your team just in a normal capacity. It's hard to make time to test it, right? I think that's a critical component of things. But what does that cadence look like? Maybe we just start with, we're going to test once a year, and that's okay. But maybe you need to test it more than that too. And I think that's another way to help uncover the gaps and things that you maybe haven't thought about. But I would just encourage everyone to have some sort of cadence around testing what this plan would actually look like in action.
Absolutely.
For
I would
sure.
say the last thing that I would think of here is be real honest with yourself. You know as well as I do that you're trying to run your business. You're trying to help your customers. You're trying to make your money. The last thing you're thinking about on a day-to-day is taking care of yourself. Especially like in my industry where we're service, we're go. We need to make sure that you have what you need. Be honest with yourself about that you're not going to make time for yourself or your company, and then schedule it anyway. Lock it down and say, this is immovable. We're talking about this today. Oh, got a question.
Yeah, for sure. Looks like we do have a question there. All right. One, will your company be able to send notification via text message rather than email if electricity is an issue in either area to let us know that your system's running? And then two, should your system be running and Orleans is still not up to date, will you be able to transfer our calls to ourselves?
100%. That's one of the greatest things about having software-based telecommunication. The same exact software and services that I use in-house right now are the same ones that our clients use. I can be in the middle of Canada and still work perfectly normally because my phone is not tied to my ability to communicate through my phone number isn't tied to my desk. It's not tied to this building. This building doesn't need to exist for this conversation to even happen. All of this equipment can be moved anywhere else.
And we can route those communications, and that's part of your plan, right? I spent a lot of time working on the phone side and that technology, and I think ITC did a great job of their cloud application, and so that's where Jeremy's team would jump in. Here's our plan. We know XYZ. We're going to we want to forward to these numbers, or here's our call tree, or we want to roll over. That's exactly what we're here to do, and we can help you prepare that on my side. We can be very proactive in what you want that to look like. And then, Jeremy's team gets involved when you're ready to pull the trigger.
And as far as the first question, can we send notifications through text? Yeah, there's several ways. We have the option to text you your actual cell phone list directly if we need to. For us, the ITC cloud app, same one I'm talking about that makes it where I don't necessarily need a desk phone. can send and receive text messages directly to it. We're super flexible when it comes to how we communicate. I think a lot of people think that if we're going to get a notice, it'll be an email notice. In the case of connectivity problems, like power's out, communications are going wonky, whatever have you, we found that hitting all the angles at the same time is the only way to get you the message. So let's say your cell phones are down because of a tower that went out. Then of course we're gonna send the email. We're gonna send messages through the software app in case we can get you that way. But yeah, 100%. Both of those we can knock out of the park for you right this second.
And I know that's, written into our own recovery plans, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've got to actively account for those situations, and there's a particular section where our CSM team is reaching out directly, well in advance of the storm hitting to let you know, hey, submit your requests, or let you know we're working on our stuff. So we're touching that well in advance and making sure that we've been in touch with you at least far enough in advance to know that you can reach us one of 10 different ways.
Absolutely.
All right, y'all. Well, fellows, I appreciate you joining us here. I don't see any other questions coming through. Thank you to everybody for hanging out with us. By all means, if you didn't get a hold of that prep checklist, when we follow up with the recording emails, I'll make sure to send out a reminder there. Check it out, work through it with your teams, and see where you're at. And again, if you need some assistance with that, our team is here. We're happy to help, whether it's setting up backups or just taking a quick look at your plan to see if there's any way we can improve things. But again, guys, I appreciate you joining us. Thank you everybody for being here, and you have a good afternoon.
Absolutely. Have a good one.